Andy Murray just handed Alex Eala the keys to a luxury apartment, and the tennis world froze mid-scroll, stunned, confused, and hungry for answers, because nobody saw this coming, not even close. A gift so intimate and unexpected that even Eala herself reportedly struggled to speak, because this wasn't a sponsorship, wasn't a brand move, wasn't some glossy publicity stunt dressed up for headlines. It was something deeper, heavier, the kind of gesture that makes fans lean in and whisper, "What's really going on here, and why now?" Right when Ayala's career sits at its most fragile and defining crossroads. Because until this moment, no one even knew they were close at all. And yet here stands Andy Murray, three-time Grand Slam champion, eternal fighter, the man who dragged himself back from career-ending surgery and rewrote the definition of resilience in modern tennis, standing somehow connected to Alex Eala, the rising Filipino talent grinding through challenger courts and brutal WTA qualifiers, chasing the top 100 with nothing but raw talent, stubborn belief, and relentless determination. And on paper they made no sense together, different generations, different continents, different battles, different scars. But life doesn't follow rankings or logic, and somewhere along the way their paths crossed in a way nobody predicted, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, without cameras or interviews, just a conversation on a London practice court during grass season when Eala was struggling to adjust her baseline instincts to a surface that felt like betrayal under her feet. Training at the National Tennis Center, searching for balance, confidence, and belief, while Murray happened to be there too, recovering from yet another injury, carrying years of pain, perspective, and hard-earned wisdom. And in that quiet moment, something began that the world is only now starting to notice. Setback after setback, Murray was hitting with his team on the adjacent court when he noticed her first, not because anyone pointed her out, but because of the way she moved, the way she chased balls most players would abandon, the quiet refusal in her body language to give up, and the fire that flashed in her eyes every single time she missed a shot, a look that felt familiar, like a mirror of someone he used to be, maybe the younger version of himself who once slept in cramped hotel rooms, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the dream would ever turn real. And slowly, almost accidentally, they started talking, small exchanges at first, quick comments about footwork on grass, how to stay balanced, how to trust the slide, then longer conversations unfolded about the tour, about the loneliness that creeps in when you travel without a real support system, about how brutal it is to survive at the highest level when you don't have the resources others take for granted. And Murray began to see something in Eala that most people missed, not just her forehand or her court coverage, but the invisible weight she carried, the pressure of trying to become the first Filipino woman to truly break through professional tennis, the expectations of an entire nation pressing down on her shoulders, the constant financial strain of funding her own career while competing against players surrounded by million-dollar teams. And he never said this to her out loud, not then, but something shifted inside him that day, a quiet decision forming, that if he could help he would, not in a symbolic gesture or empty encouragement, but in a way that actually changed something. So he stayed in touch, messages after her matches, advice when she reached out, steady, consistent, and intentional. Quiet encouragement followed when the losses stacked up and the rankings refused to budge. And then Murray heard about how she was living, bouncing between airbums, staying with host families, crashing on couches between tournaments, carrying her dreams in a suitcase with no real place to land. And that was the moment he knew words weren't enough anymore. Something had to change, and it happened on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon in late September, right after Eala walked off court in Spain. Following a brutal 3-set loss at a WTA 125 event, drained, frustrated, quietly wondering if she was actually progressing or just running in circles at the same level month after month, when her coach told her they needed to head to London for a quick meeting, something vague about off-season training logistics, nothing urgent, nothing dramatic, so she didn't question it, until they arrived at a sleek apartment building in South Kensington, one of London's most prestigious neighborhoods, where Eala assumed it was another sponsor meeting, another familiar routine of polite smiles and empty promises, because she'd seen that movie before. But when they stepped into the lobby there were no boardrooms, no executives in suits, just a set of keys resting on a marble counter beside a handwritten note that read, "For Alex, you deserve a home base. Keep fighting, Andy." And she stood there reading it again and again, 3 times, then looked at her coach in disbelief, whispering, "Is this real?" And he nodded, telling her it was hers, that he bought it for her. And upstairs on the 4th floor waited a 2-bedroom apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street, a fully equipped kitchen, a living room spacious enough for recovery equipment, and a second bedroom that could double as a training or meditation space. Not just luxury but intention, every detail built around an athlete's life. Blackout curtains for post-match recovery and extra firm mattress, silence instead of city noise, and Ayala walked through it all without a word, hands trembling, not crying or screaming, just standing there trying to understand how her life had shifted in a single afternoon. And later, when the world finally found out, she posted one photo on Instagram, no caption, just the view from the window. Golden hour light poured through the glass, soft and quiet. And within an hour fans noticed the location tag. Within 2 hours the story detonated across the internet. Because Andy Murray had just given Alex Eala a home. And suddenly the tennis world couldn't stop talking, some calling it the most generous act the sport had ever seen, others squinting suspiciously, asking about motives, mentorship, charity, or something deeper. And the speculations spiraled fast, think pieces appearing overnight. Podcasts dissecting every detail, tennis Twitter turning into a full-blown battlefield of opinions. But beneath all that noise lingered one unanswered question: why? And to understand that, you have to rewind all the way back to 2005, when Murray was 19, ranked outside the top 100, traveling alone to ATP tournaments with nothing but a duffel bag and a dream that felt just out of reach, supported fiercely by his mother Judy, who sacrificed everything. Yet even then there were nights he didn't know where he'd sleep, hotel rooms costing more than he could afford, training facilities locked behind fees he couldn't pay, meals chosen by price not nutrition, recovery sessions skipped because physios were a luxury, lying awake exhausted, wondering if he'd ever break through or if one bad month could end it all. And those memories never left him, the isolation, the pressure, the constant fear, because when he looked at Alex Eala, he saw that same familiar look in her eyes, not identical circumstances. Her family did everything they could, the Philippine Tennis Association helped where possible, but the WTA Tour is unforgiving for players outside the top 50, where prize money barely covers expenses and sponsorships don't come unless you're already famous. And for someone like Eala, carrying the hopes of an entire nation while funding her own career, the weight wasn't just heavy, it was suffocating. Murray had been watching her results quietly for months, the early round exits, the qualifying heartbreaks, those flashes of brilliance that lit up a match only to be followed by crushing defeats. And he knew exactly what that cycle did to a young player, how it slowly eroded confidence, how it crept into your thoughts at night and made you wonder if you truly belonged at this level at all. But he also knew something else just as clearly, that Aya had the talent, that she was closer than the rankings suggested, that she wasn't missing belief or effort, and that what she needed wasn't another hollow sponsorship deal or a recycled motivational speech, but something tangible, something real, something that could remove one constant source of stress and let her focus entirely on her tennis. So he bought the apartment not as a loan, not as an investment, but as a gift, outright, with no strings attached, no expectations, no repayment, because he didn't want headlines or praise or credit. He just wanted to give a young player the kind of stability he wished he'd had at her age. And in a private message he sent her after she moved in, he wrote that he wasn't doing this because he thought she needed saving, but because he knew she was going to make it, and that when she did she would remember this moment and maybe one day do the same for someone else. A message that never became public, but according to people close to Aya, it changed everything, because for the first time in years she felt like she could finally breathe. And when the story broke, the reaction was instant and deeply polarizing, with one side of fans standing in awe, calling it the most beautiful act of mentorship modern tennis had ever seen. They started comparing Murray to legends like Billie Jean King, icons who spent decades lifting the next generation instead of guarding the spotlight, saying this was exactly what the sport had been missing. Established stars using their resources to help those still climbing, proof that this is what a real champion actually looks like when the cameras are off. And one viral tweet summed it up perfectly: Andy Murray just became my favorite player forever. But the internet never moves in one direction for long, and on the other side of the conversation skepticism began to simmer, because a male champion giving a luxury apartment to a young female player raised eyebrows in an era hyper-aware of power dynamics and hidden agendas. And it didn't take long for conspiracy theories to spread, whispers asking if there was more to this relationship than mentorship, if Murray was trying to control her career, if this crossed some invisible line into something darker. And suddenly tennis forums were on fire, Reddit threads spiraled into chaos, TikTok creators slowed down clips and analyzed body language frame by frame, hunting for meanings that weren't there, while even respected journalists felt compelled to weigh in, some praising Murray's generosity and calling it rare and necessary, others asking uncomfortable questions about why a male player felt the need to save a female player at all and whether this kind of paternalism truly represented progress, until the debates spilled onto broadcasts themselves, when Patrick McEnroe mid-commentary paused and said, "Look, Andy's heart is in the right place, but I do wonder if this sets a precedent. Are we saying young players can't make it without a benefactor because that's not the message we want to send?" A single sentence that captured the tension perfectly: admiration colliding with doubt, generosity colliding with suspicion, and a sport struggling to decide what kindness should look like in the modern age. Others fired back just as fiercely, with Martina Navratilova cutting through the noise by posting, "People will criticize anything. Andy saw someone who needed help and helped. That's it. Stop looking for problems where there aren't any." And for many that should have been the end of it, but the loudest, most emotional voices came from the Philippines, where this was never about optics or power dynamics. It was about respect, about recognition, about a 3-time Grand Slam champion seeing their country's rising star and believing in her enough to invest not just words but real action. And Filipino tennis communities rallied around Eala instantly, hashtags trending for days, murals of Murray and Eala appearing in Manila, t-shirts being printed. Because for a nation that had never seen a player crack the top 100, this gesture felt historic, almost unreal. Yet through all the noise, one voice stayed silent: Alex Eala herself. Until now, 3 weeks after the story exploded, she finally spoke, not at a press conference, not in a polished Instagram post, but in a quiet one-on-one interview with a Filipino journalist she trusted, uploaded to YouTube without fanfare, just her sitting inside the apartment Murray had given her, speaking plainly, honestly from the heart, saying she didn't know how to react at first, that she thought it was a joke or a mistake because things like that don't happen to people like her, pausing, looking down at her hands, explaining that she'd been on tour for years and every day felt like a battle, not just on court but off it too, finding places to stay, managing costs, worrying that one injury could end everything because she couldn't afford time off, that weight always there, something she thought everyone simply carried as part of the journey, until she looked straight into the camera and said Andy showed her it didn't have to be that way, that someone believing in you can change everything. Not because they fix every problem but because they tell you that you matter, that your dream is worth investing in. And when the interviewer finally asked if she now felt pressure to succeed because of the gift, the room went quiet, waiting for her answer. Eala smiled then, a real smile, not the polished one she wears in post-match interviews, and said she felt the opposite of pressure, that for the first time she could fail without losing everything, that she finally had a place to return to. A place to train, recover, think, breathe, and that freedom, not the apartment itself but what it represented, was what would make her better. And when asked about the criticism, the doubts, the questions about Murray's motives and power dynamics, her expression tightened just slightly as she said people will always find something to criticize, but she knows Andy's heart, knows what he's been through, knows this wasn't about control or publicity, just one person helping another, nothing more. And if others can't see that, that's their problem, not hers. And before the interview ended, she made a quiet promise that one day when she's where she wants to be, she'll do this for someone else. Because Andy didn't just give her an apartment, he gave her a blueprint for how to give back. And the video went viral not for drama but for its honesty. And for the first time since the story broke, people stopped arguing and started listening. Because this story was never really about an apartment. It was about the gap between talent and opportunity, the invisible weight that crushes young players before they ever get a chance. And while Alex Eala is one of the lucky ones, not because she's the most talented or worked the hardest, but because someone with resources chose to act, there are hundreds more grinding through ITF and Challenger events right now, sleeping in budget motels, skipping meals to afford entry fees, watching careers end not from lack of talent but lack of money. And Murray's gesture exposed an uncomfortable truth the sport prefers to ignore, that the system is broken, that without wealth or early discovery your chances are slim, prompting praise from some, silence from others. Sloane Stephens writing that it was beautiful but heartbreaking, Ons Jabeur sharing that mentorship and giving back matter, while critics questioned whether charity was sustainable or if real change should come from a system that doesn't force players to rely on benefactors, asking why tours making billions have no safety net, a fair question long avoided. And yet in the meantime Andy Murray did what he could, not for recognition, not for praise, but because he saw someone who deserved a chance and chose to give it. He did it because he remembered exactly what it feels like to be young, talented, and painfully alone, standing on the edge of a dream that could disappear at any moment, And he did it because he believes in a tennis world where talent isn't quietly wasted simply because money runs out first, and maybe, just maybe, this moment is the beginning of something bigger. A shift in how the sport looks after its rising stars. A reminder that mentorship isn't just words whispered in passing or advice given from afar, it's action when it matters most. And whether this changes Eala's career forever is something only time can answer. But one thing is already certain: she will never forget the day someone believed in her enough to give her not just shelter, but stability, trust, and a place to call home. And if you believe more champions should follow Andy Murray's example and turn belief into action, drop a comment below and let the conversation continue.